Welcome to the Budgeting with FMS webinar. My name's Chris Nolan. I'm here with John Klein and we'll both be presenting today. But just wanted to give you guys some information on how to bring your budgets into FMS for the new year. Alright, basically budgeting with FMS, this is really going to be for you to set your own goals for your stores, and then we're going to show you how to bring those goals into FMS and how to compare those to actual activity throughout the year. But basically, you'll build and import your budgets for each fiscal year and then compare those budgets within our structured report writer. And we'll show you some examples of that. The FMS system does have the ability to compare multiple budgets and forecasts for a particular fiscal year. And we'll kind of show you how to do that as well. The actual step-by-step instructions can be found in the General Ledger Manual on the FMS Portal Applications tab. So if you go to page 155 on that PDF file, it will take you right to the step-by-step instructions on how to do everything we talk about today. Alright, we got some basic steps for budgeting, and this is what John and I will be going through today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to John to do steps 1 and 2.
What we want to cover today isn't so much the theory of budgeting or the pros and cons of budgeting, etc. Obviously, I think we as finance professionals, we all understand that. One of the most frequent questions I get is how do I go about obtaining data, historical data from which to build a budget upon? And so I thought that's what we would cover today. We have a number of tools to do that. The principal two are our query tool that's called Empower, which is readily accessible to any of our customers using the FMS portal. And of course, you can always use the fallback, the standard trial balance reports. Each has its pros and its cons. Certainly, Empower it gives you tons of data, a lot of granularity. Whereas if you want to see trial balance over a number of periods, then you have to run multiple reports. So let's take a look. As I would assume most of you guys are familiar with how to run trial balances, but I don't know how familiar each of you guys are with how to use our Empower tool. So we have a number of canned reports that we use internally. All of my accounting staff uses to do work. In fact, Chris, as you can see, Chris Nolan has written a number of those. The one that I use a lot is the 6001 report, and what that allows me to do is run a query over a given data set. And Chris, I'm going to let you type this in because there's too many screens open. But so what we'll do first is illustrate how to use Empower. It's different for each of you based on your libraries, but the report is the same. If you'd want to have these reports, we can certainly have the IT group copy them into your library and initialize them. They should work fine. So Chris now has our canned report. In this case, it's called 6001. Account activity based on posted date. So Chris, go ahead. He's going to run it over our demo library.
Sure. And for those of you who are BPO clients who your accounting is done here at FMS, we can make this report available in your common reports environment as well. Pardon the weird date that I'm putting in. This is a demo environment, and we don't have all the frills put on here for calendars, drop-ins, and things like that.
But yeah, it's using that one means century. It's just odd, but we would build for you guys. We would put in a date drop down.
Right, and you can run this report over any kind of format. The easiest one for budgeting would be the formatted Excel version. For sake of speed, we're going to do it in HTML just so you can see what it looks like. So you just hit Run Report. You know what? I ran that for the admin store. Let me change that to 421. I didn't follow my own instructions.
Excel.
You want to go ahead and do Excel?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is going to convert this to an Excel format. I'll bring over Microsoft Excel, and this is the report here.
That's good.
Okay.
So like any good cooking show, this is how you get the raw data out. And all this did is it, for a given span of time, it queried every journal entry of any type, AP, CR, JE, whatever it may be, over the span of time across the ledger accounts and departments that you ask it to do. So what we, and like any good cooking show, I've also done some work prior to this, obviously. So let me see if I can pull that up. Yes, I wanted to close those. Okay. This is a sales file that we developed with a client some time ago. This is, and this data is exactly from the same source, different library, but same source from the Empower report that Chris ran a few minutes ago. As you can see, this has sales by day across. It's got store, it's got department. Obviously, in this particular case, it's a standard chart setup, so it's 4010 as sales. Every day for this particular client, we have sales, historical sales for the past year. Obviously, we did some VLOOKUPs, used a calendar lookup, a VLOOKUP, and then a calendar to assign periods. Now what that does is once you get all of your sales, and some customers I do this for by week, some prefer to budget by week. So you could do period or week here. It's really up to you as to what you want to do relative to a VLOOKUP. But once you get the raw data down, you could run this across sales, you could run this across rent, you could run this across utilities, anything, labor, whatever it is you wanted to do. The entirety of our general ledger is accessible using this Empower query tool. I will tell you this as an aside, not only do I use this a great deal for budgeting, but for the accounting work that I still get involved in, I use Empower. I mean, I ride it like a witch rides a broom. It absolutely saves me hours of time each time I get ready to use it. So clearly what we took here, I mean, the rest of this is an Excel exercise. I'm not going to bore you to death with Excel exercises. But the spreadsheet we built is we got the raw data. In this case, this customer budgeted by period. We did a VLOOKUP against the table and said, okay, we assigned periods. And then it was fairly easy to come in and say, okay, what are sales? In this case, we run it across the first eight months of the year. By department, by store, what were the sales? We then fed that into an overall template, which said, okay, based on stores for each period, by department, what were the sales? And then we built this tool that said, based on budgeting factors, we either want to add sales to it or we want to add it. Maybe maybe the store has a competitive opening, so we could put in a percentage change as well. But we built it where we could do dollars or sales. You budget by category, by store, by period. And then, of course, it fills in the various sales templates. Again, I'm not going to bore you with all of that data, except to say what I think is extremely important relative to the conversation we're having today collectively is the very easiest way, I think, out of our system is to use Empower, is to pull data down. For some of you guys who maybe have multiple stores, you may need to pull this. You may want to pull this in quarterly segments as opposed to an entire year because, obviously it's if you had a 20 store chain and pulled it for a year, it's going to pull daily data across all departments. That's a big thing to do. But if you wanted to do it from a standpoint of quarters, I've done that as well. Not a bad way to get data. Another way to get information is to use our trial balance report. Now, trial balance reports you run over a point in time. You run it for a period. We can run it by a week. You can run it by a period, multiple periods, or of course a year. And anytime you run that, of course, you run a trial balance, and it pulls right into Excel. It'll render to Excel. A lot of times, what I'll do is I'll delete the rows that have retail, and then I'll give you a bit of a heads up. One of the system enhancements we're working on is going to be able to run. So you can hold your applause for this one, but it's something I've asked for, and it should hopefully either be out this quarter or next. is to be able to run a trial balance that already has the store in the information. So in this case, as you can see, this is store 420. The new system enhancement that we're going to put out there will give you the opportunity to run it with that store down the left. But the point being is, even today, if you simply add a column, you can type in the store number and come all the way down through here and then sort it and get rid of your blanks. And what that gives you is the ability to then spin this quickly to a pivot. The upside to running it in trial balance is that it comes in and it's already summarized for the period that you ran it for. The downside is if you want to do this by month, you have to run 12 trial balances. I think the beauty of the trial balance, and Chris can show you this in a bit in the trial balance area, is what I do like about using the trial balance tool is you can narrow it down to run the entire GL or a section of the chart of accounts, or you can just do, for example, 4010 if that day what you're wanting to do is run one just for sales or for utilities, whatever it may be that you're budgeting. All that said, to give a little bit of picture to all this, no, wrong file. Earlier I showed you the sales file that we built, the sales template that we built, and the way that you can drag history over, put it into some sort of predictive modeling tool, and develop sales. The next thing I suggest is to develop some sort of budget master that you want to use. In this case, you can see that when I developed this, or one of my staff developed, it has sales, obviously by department, across periods, purchases, obviously just like we do a P&L, rebates on down to shrink, and we'll get down to gross profit, salaries, and wages. We like to build some methodology in that says, okay, you can either do this by dollars or you can do it by percent. We'll throw it into here based on some history or whatever it may be, and it carries forward to the total budget. So you get your total budget built, and then you say, well, okay, well, what do I do with this? How do I write reports against it? Yeah, let me find that, Chris. That would be called.
Are you getting ready to go into
I want this one. I'll open the wrong one. And this is not the prettiest piece of work, but it was one I had handy. The important part of this spreadsheet is that I want to illustrate is once you build your budgets, the ability then to get it into our system, into the budgeting section of our system, so that you can write SRWs against the report in order to have a budget versus actual. The upload tool looks a lot like any other journal entry tool, except for it's obviously got more period. You can do it by week, you can do it by month, you can do it by quarter, whatever you wish. But you have, as you build your budgeting tool, one thing you want to keep in mind is you want to budget by chart of account, by general ledger object code segment, so that you can then link it to an upload template and upload it. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to report against what you've done. And I'm going to turn that part over to Chris. But yeah, I think the important takeaways from what I spoke about is how do you get information out of the system? The Empower tool. Chris, where is? Do you have a copy of our portal page? Here?
I can get it for you.
Yeah, pull up. So Chris will show you right quick how to access that. But I would suggest to you guys, if you're not using the Empower tool, I'll be your best friend today if you contact Chris or contact me, and my email is jonc@fmssolutions.com, jonc@fmssolutions.com. So obviously what Chris is showing now is the inside of our portal. The Empower tool, you can get to applications, i.e. the general ledger or payroll. You can launch it from the applications tab. Reporting tab is where the FMS Empower tool is. Any of the canned reports that we have, there's already a number of reports out there for you, but any of these reports that we have canned to run over either the general ledger, over payroll, or the accounts payable system, oftentimes they're already written. All you've got to call up and say is, look, can you copy that into my environment? And it takes literally 15-20 minutes. So if you're not using Empower, certainly suggest you do. And it's a great way to get data out from a budgeting perspective. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to have data from which historical data of some sort to predict future budgeting methodologies. So with that, Chris, I will turn it over to you to show how to upload this stuff.
Sure. Well, since we're in here, one thing to mention, like we said before, that general ledger manual that has all the steps that we're covering today is right here. General Ledger GUI sections 1 through 6. It's page 155. Okay, let me get John's stuff out of the way here. At this point, once you've created your budget spreadsheet, you're going to want to either get that into FMS somehow. So step number 3 here, if you're a BPO client, at this point you don't have access to upload the budget due to limited menus that you have. So you'll need to send those to your FMS representative. If you're an apps client, we'll go on to step 4 here. Okay, step 4 is create budget categories in FMS Focus. So we're going to bring up the FMS software first thing. Bring it over. And under General Ledger, there's a Budgets menu right here in the middle. Click that, and you're going to click Budget Categories. Creating a budget category is very simple. You click Add, and you give it a short name and a description. So call it budget for the category and training budget for the description. Hit OK and confirm, and now you've created a category. It's that simple. Basically what you're creating is a holding place for your budgets or forecasts. Alright, step 5 is going to be to import that budget into FMS Focus. So to do that, from the main menu you'll go to Interfaces, Imports Interface menu at the very top. And there's some budget buttons here that you need to address. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that your store is cross-referenced. So we'll do Budget Store Cross-Reference. And whatever store you use on your spreadsheet, this is where you'll put that store number here. Typically we're going to use the same store number that you have in FMS. But you can see here, this particular budget that we uploaded, the store number on the spreadsheet was 1111, but it was going to store 420. You just add that by clicking Add, and whatever your interface store is. Put in your company, your corp and store in FMS that it would be mapped to. Hit it OK, and now you can see that that interface has been set up. All right, so now I'm going to switch over and take a look at a little simple import spreadsheet that I put together so that it's easy for you guys to see. Alright, so once you get your budget set up, what I recommend doing is creating a little budget template that has a row for each account that you want to have a budgeted amount in. And you can see here I've simplified this one just for sales, grocery, sales, meat, COGS, grocery and meat, rebates, and some payroll and some other things. But you can, any account you have in the GL, you can put a monthly budget in for. Alright, so in this case, I have a weekly budget set up. So you can see there's a column for each week. If you were going to do a monthly budget like John had, there would only be 12 columns here, not 52. We have our account number in FMS and the department number here. Now I have this feeding into the import sheet, and this is the same thing that John showed you a minute ago. But basically it's set up just like this. It's a comma, and you'll save it as a comma separated file. The specifications for this are located in the General Ledger manual. It'll tell you exactly what you need to do to make this work. But once this is here, all you do is save as. And instead of an Excel workbook, you're going to change it to a CSV. And just hit save. All right, you can close that. Get rid of John's stuff here. And the next thing you're going to need to do is get the data transfer tool that you probably have for cash receipts or anything else. And we're going to set this up just for a budget upload. So basically the file name will be the CSV file wherever you saved it on your computer. You'll browse to that. Your system stays the same. It should be this 172.20.112.62. And then your library and file member. Well, your library, if you already have one of these, should stay the same as FCS data and then the 2 initials of your library. In this case, it's BF. But this is the part you're going to want to pay attention to. It needs to look just like this. So BDGIMPRT, parentheses, BDGIMPRT for the file and the member. Close parentheses. Once you do that, then you can transfer that budget into the system. So you just hit transfer and it'll take all those rows from that file. Okay, now that your file has been uploaded into your environment, you go back to the Imports interface menu where we did the budget store cross-reference, and now you're going to execute that budget file. We're going to load the budget import file. And just hit OK and confirm. And you'll get an error report in your portal if there were problems with your upload. And then once you've loaded it, you're going to want to update the GL budgets from that file to your particular general ledger. So now this is where you pick the budget category that you just, we did budget, but I did training earlier. And then the GL year, so you'll pick your calendar year that you want that budget applied to. In this case, it was 2013A. It's going to ask you to replace existing budget amounts. Be careful here. If you have existing budget amounts in there and you're just adding a few things, you're going to hit no and it'll only fill in the new items. Otherwise, hit yes and it'll override anything that's already there. Click OK and confirm. And again, there'll be an error report in your spool file if something is wrong. At this point, your budget has been loaded into the system. You can go in and make changes to it if you need to. We recommend building a structured report, adding a budget column, and then running that report to make sure your budget matches to the spreadsheet year to date. But if you need to make changes to individual accounts, just go back to General Ledger, Budgets menu, and then Corporate Year Budgets. It's the second button here. Put in your corporation that applies to that budget, and then go down to the calendar year that you added the budget to. You can see here we added it to 2013 and it's turned blue and says that there's budgets in there. So we'll hit that and hit budgets. At this point you see that training is in here, but now we could have had multiple budgets listed if we wanted to. It just needs a different budget category for each year. So you can have different types of budgets for each year, and you can bring those in each column on the structured report writer.
And where that's really useful is obviously you may have a primary budget for the year. I used to work, I came here from Super Value. We budgeted like every other day. So we would have reforecast 1, reforecast 2, reforecast 22. If you had a quarterly sales, if your operational people did quarterly sales budgets, you could do that. So you can have, I think it's up to literally 1,000 different budgets in the system, and can build reports and compare and contrast to each. And that's a great thing to do.
All right, if we want to look at the individual rows, you just click on whichever budget category you have listed here and click Account Headers. So now we could jump right to the account that we budgeted for. In this case, we put one for grocery sales, and I'll hit filter right down there. Now you can see the budgeted items that I have. This is the total budget for the entire year that we put in there, and you can see the interval was weekly since we had 52 columns. If I want to see the details there, I can go in here in details, and now if I need to change any of these things, I can just change them individually to craft the budget to be exactly like I want it to be if you don't have that already on the spreadsheet. So you can make changes here quickly and easily if you need to for 1 or 2 accounts. If you need to make a wholesale changes across the entire thing, we recommend just making those adjustments on the spreadsheet and then just re-uploading the budget and overriding the amounts to save time.
It's also nice to have it be the principal place you keep it.
That's right. Okay, that's pretty much it for getting the budget into the system. Now we're going to look at working with the budgets. Actually, we talked about working with the budgets in FMS Focus and making adjustments. Now we're going to look at the budget column on the structured reports. And this can be as detailed as you want it to be. But let's go to General Ledger, Reports, and Define and Run Structured Reports. This is where you actually bring those budget reports into light. So I've got a sample report set up here, and really the budgets are going to be based on your columns. So your rows are going to be just like your normal P&Ls or income statements or whatever you have. No change there. But the budget comes in on the columns. So let's look at columns. And you can see the columns that we're showing here for this particular report is current period, the percentage column for that period. And then we have a current period budget and a current period budget percentage setup, and also a variance. So let's look at each of these so you can kind of see how the setup works. So under current period, you can see it's set up just like reports that you currently have set up in your system. Current period, the data source would be transaction amount for that period based on cost and the headers and all of that. We've got it set up for dollar round. It's going to be a period interval and based on whatever fixed date you put in your structured report. Okay, the percentage is just a simple percentage. It's referring back to column 1. You can see how that's set up there. And when you edit out, it says, okay, what column do you want this percentage to refer to? So that's column 1. So I inserted current period budget column. So let's take a look at the difference on that one. Basically, it's the same column type as DA. You can change the description to whatever you want it to be. The data source now is going to be changed to a G, which is budget. So if you drop down, you see we've got beginning balance, ending balance, transaction amount, which is what the current period was. And now we're going to bring in budget. Cost is still that. And now you're going to enter in your budget category. So the budget training is what we created. This is going to tell the column what budget to look at. So if you had multiple budgets, you could have a column for the training budget, a column for whatever other budgets you put in for that particular year. Or you could have different reports with different budget categories. Change your header here to reflect that it is a budget column, and nothing else has changed. Same thing on the percentage. All we're doing is updating the description and referring it back to the budget column. And it's referring back to 2.1. And if you forget what the column numbers are, just drop down here and you can see the descriptions. And then the last thing that I want to show you is a variance column. This is a calculated column, and basically what it's going to do is take the current period minus the budget to give us a variance between the two. And you don't have to have these if you don't want to, but it is an option in the system. And it's really straight up, column type is CA for calculate, variance, so on and so forth. And then the second page of this is going to say, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to add current period minus current period budget. You can do it the other way if you like to see current period budget minus current period. Doesn't matter. And then that's all you have to do to get the budget amount in there and do a variance. Now you can set this up for quarter to date, year to date, and you can have variance for all of those things. You can see different columns that are set up here. The only ones I'm showing though are going to be the current period and the current period budget and the variance on the sample report. Now you just run your report like normal, run an extract, and put in the description and put in your date, hit enter and confirm, and you'll get your structured report with the budget. And I have that right here. So you can see it's a very basic report. There was no current period information added in yet, since we would be doing this for the next year. This is going to be to test our budget amounts. So you can see here you've got grocery sales, grocery cost of sales, your budgeted gross profit, and then the variance between the two. So, and that just goes down through everything that we budgeted until you get to the end of the report. Blow that up just a little bit bigger. It might be easier to see. So once the sales data comes in for the next year, that'll start populating the current period column, and the variance will adjust accordingly. And again, you can do this for multiple budgets. If you want to do a certain type of budget for one thing and run a report with a different kind of budget for the same year, that's perfectly fine. John, you want to add anything?
No, obviously we're not going to teach. We're not trying to teach budgeting techniques today. Everybody budgets differently. But what we want to make sure that you're aware of is that there are absolutely tools that are very efficient to use to obtain historical data out of the system to help you with the budgeting process. We certainly want you to know that that there are ways to get data from the system into your budgeting tool, and from your budgeting tool into the FMS system, and then ways to report back. And as I mentioned earlier, you can have multiple types of budgets, or different versions of budgets in the system. One of my personal favorite things to do or see done is to have a budget that is that you use for your weekly management reporting, that has your quarterly, for the next quarter, for however long it may be. You have your weekly sales projections. You can then, when you do your weekly reporting, compare actuals to history as well as budget. So a lot of things out there, a lot of tools. We've covered a lot today. Chris really got into some technical aspects of the system as to how to load budgets into the system and report against it. If you have questions about that, or want more data, or some personalized one-on-one training, both of our contact information is on the screen. Reach out to either one of us, and we would love to help. It's budgeting time of year, and we certainly think it's the best practice to use budgets. I can tell you, whenever I've seen it used, it certainly enhances the P&L. So that's all I have, Chris.
Don't forget that we have the Friday 15 webinars at Friday mornings at 11:45 Eastern Time. And if you need an invitation to those, please give me a call or shoot me an email, and I will send that out to you. Thank you for your participation today.